Hi everyone. The lesson is Classes and Objects Part 5 Methods Continuation in Objective-C. So this is Part 5 and it's continuation of methods. So you need to make sure you look Part 4 also, which is also about methods before this lesson. So we'll be using Xcode version 11.6 and these tools for referencing. You need to make sure you look at the previous lesson and you can find the link to that in the description. You'll be learning here about multiple parameters and returning values. As usual, you will be doing practical demonstrations. So let's look at the previous project. So this is where we stopped in the previous project. So we are continuing this project. So let me quickly remind you what we have done so far. We have a calculator class. So this is the public interface of the calculator class. We have one method with we have a method with one parameter, and we have implemented that method, and then we have create object and pass the parameter. So for a detailed explanation about this lesson, look at our previous lesson. So now, assuming you have looked the previous lesson, so now you have a clear understanding of this. So if you want to pass multiple parameters, the developer doc says, okay, this is the method name and this is the first parameter. Then if you have a second parameter, you have to put a connecting label, right? So you call it as a connecting label. That is the syntax, that is the theory. So you have to put a connecting label and another and a type. So in other words, if I copy this, right? So there should be a space after the first parameter. Then I will copy this, and if I take it to the interface, so after the first parameter, you will keep a space and then you will put the connecting label. This can be anything, right? This can be anything. So let's say this is number 2, right? So let me put this as the connecting label as, well, like and number 2. It can be anything, you know, some meaningful. It should be some meaningful name, right? And the type is going to be an integer, right? And let's say it's number 2. So then if I copy this line, that is what you have to put into the implementation. So just here, it should be this. Now you got two parameters, number 1 and number 2. What is this? Once again, it's the connecting label. So now from inside the method, you don't have to declare a local variable because you are getting now number 1 and number 2 as parameters. So number 1 is the first parameter, number 2 is the second parameter. Then once again, what is this? You call this as a connecting label. So once you declare your first parameter, what you have to do is you have to put a connecting label. You have to give a meaningful name. It can be anything. If I want, I can put X. But rather than putting X, if I put X, it's not meaningful. So I should put a meaningful connecting label. So it's why do I say and number 2? Because my method is add, and once again it's a meaningful name with number 1 is like a naming convention. So add with number 1, which is this, and number 2. So that's how you read it. Simple as that. You are done with that, right? So now in the implementation, you got two parameters. So then how do you call the method? So when you call the method, if I try to run this now, it won't work. I'm getting errors because there's no such a method called add with number 1, because now the method is add with number 1 and number 2. So in other words, when you now if you start typing the method name, you will see add with number 1 and number 2. So that is this method signature. Now you just double click on this, then you can pass the two numbers, let us say 10 and 5, right? Same here. Let's call the method, then you will see add. See, it gives add with number 1 and number 2. So let's say the first parameter is 50 and the second parameter is 20, right? Once again, the last parameter method call add with number 1 and number 2. Let's say this is, I don't know, 400, and let's say this is 300, right? So if you run this, it works and it adds different pairs of numbers, right? So this is how you pass multiple parameters. So you can see the answer is 15, 70, and so on. It's working. So in this lesson, you learn about passing multiple parameters, right? So to revise, in you after the first parameter, you put a connecting label, put something meaningful, and then colon and the data type and the parameter, and then you can use it from here, and then you will be calling it like this, right? Awesome. Okay, and let's say if you want to pass three parameters for the add method, what you would do is you will copy this and you can add another parameter. Say you can say and number 3, and then you can put the parameter. So say number 3. So why am I keeping the earlier one? This means, so if you want, you can add with only 2 parameters, or if you want, you can add with 3 parameters. So that is why I'm keeping both. But if you don't want to add only 2 parameters, you can delete this, right, and keep only this. So it's up to you to decide whether you want both or only this. So in my case, I will keep both. So either I can add only 2 numbers, or if not, I can add 3 numbers, right? Okay, great. So the same concept. So then you will go to the implementation, then you will put this, then you will have to give the implementation. So let me copy this because it's similar. Only difference is you can say now plus number 3. Awesome. And then when you call the method, you will now get both the methods. So when you say C1 add, now you can see either add with number 1 and number 2, or add with number 1 and number 2 and number. So in this case, I will select this add with number 1, number 2, number 3, and let's give some values like this. Let's say some parameters. Now if I run this, it should work. So first it should add the first 3 methods will be passing only 2 parameters, and the last one is 35 because you pass 10, 5 and 20. So this is how you pass multiple parameters. Okay, so now let's say in certain instances, your methods, you want to return data. Let's say after adding the numbers, you want to return it and not to print it. It's up to you, but that can happen. So if you think you don't want to print it here, and if you think you want to return it, right? So then you can put the keyword return, and you can say you are returning the answer. But now the moment you are returning a value, you can't have the return type as void. So the return type should be matching whatever you are returning. So you are returning the answer. Answer is a integer. In that case, your return type should be int. So whenever you are returning data, make sure you can't put void here, right? It has to be the return type. So if you change that, then in the prototype also, in the interface, you have to put the return type as int. So now what does this mean? So this means this method, when you add the numbers, 2 numbers, it's returning you an integer, and actually you are returning the answer. So let's do it for this method, but let's keep this one as void so you can see the difference between the two. I will keep this as void. So in that, what you do is you are just printing. Here, instead of printing, you are returning, right? So let's save this. So now in the interface also you are telling it's returning. So when you call the method, for those it will not print. So if I run this, so now it prints only the last one, answer 35. Why is it? The 10, 5 to why? Because if you look at the implementations, you are printing it only when you call the method with 3 parameters. When you call the method with 2 parameters, you are just adding and returning, and you are not printing. So if you are returning, it will not get printed to the output. So if you are returning, then as normal, as usual, you have to store the return value, let's say in a variable like this. So what this means is you are calling this method, and the return value you are storing inside a variable answer1, and after that you can print it, right? So let's do it this way, saves my time. So now you can print the answer1, this variable, right? Answer1. Same, you can either reuse the same variable or yeah, let's reuse the same variable. So now after that I would like to say, okay, the answer 1 is this. So don't declare again because you have declared, just use the variable answer 1 and then you can print it. Same here, for this also you store the return value and then you can print the variable. So now when you do this, this should print. So this is how you return data. So to summarize, you will put the return type instead of void, and in that case you have to make sure you are returning the value. Why did I put int here? That is because I'm returning integer. If this was a double, here you will have to put double. If this was a string or ns string, if you are returning that, then here it has to be ns string. And if you are not returning, it's void as usual. So if you are returning, you return, then the return type is int. In that case, your signature will change, and whenever you call a method which returns a value, you have to make sure that you store it. So how do you know that you have to store it here, right? So how you know it is by looking at the signature. When you look at the signature, if it says int as a return type or something else like double or string, ns string, then you know it's returning, so that you are prepared to store it. So for example, if this said ns string, then you will declare a ns string here. If this said a double, then you will declare double here. And if the method is not returning, you just have to call it, that's it, like this. So with that you learn about how to return data as well. So we did a practical demonstration and you learn about uh, passing multiple parameters and also returning values. So we use Apple Developer Docs for referencing. Have a look at our other videos for practicals on Objective-C A to Z. You can find the link to download the source code for the practicals done in this lesson in the description section of this video. So references was Apple Developer Docs, and so we are very excited to see you in the next lesson, and let's catch you in the next lesson. See you until that.